It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world feels quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. I had just made a cup of tea and settled onto the sofa when a sudden, firm knock echoed through the apartment. It wasn't soft or hesitant. It was the kind of knock that told you something important was on the other side. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends always called first, and my family rarely visited without warning. Curious and slightly uneasy, I walked to the door and opened it. The moment I saw who was standing there, the cup almost slipped from my hand. Both my aunts, Aunt Maria and Aunt Elena, stood shoulder to shoulder, looking as if they'd just walked through a storm of emotions. These two women, my mother's sisters, had not willingly stood beside each other in over 10 years. Their relationship had been strained by jealousy, old misunderstandings, and years of unresolved tension. They avoided family gatherings, sat on opposite sides at weddings, and barely spoke during holidays. And now here they were, together on my doorstep. "Aren't you going to let us in?" Aunt Maria asked softly. Her voice tried to sound steady, but I heard the tremor. I stepped aside, still confused, and they entered slowly, almost cautiously, as if stepping into my living room meant stepping into unknown territory. They sat on the sofa without looking at each other. Their posture was stiff, their hands tightly clasped together on their laps. I could feel the tension from across the room, the thick silence pressing against the walls. "What's going on?" I finally asked, sitting across from them. Aunt Elena looked up first. Her eyes were red-rimmed, the kind that comes from nights of crying rather than a few tears. "We need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Maria took a sharp breath as if gathering courage. "And we need you to listen without judgment." My heart began to beat faster. They weren't here for small talk. They weren't here for reconciliation. Something heavier was in the room, something fragile, painful, and urgent. Then Aunt Maria said the words that stole the air from the room. "It's about your uncle. We think he's been unfaithful, and we both need your help." I stared at them, stunned. Both of them? My two aunts, broken enough by the situation to stand together after 10 long years. That was the moment I knew this was not just a family problem. This was a storm waiting to be uncovered. The air in the room felt heavy as both my aunts exchanged a long, silent glance, one filled with years of distance, pain, and now a shared fear. I waited, unsure who would speak first. Finally, Aunt Maria straightened her back slightly, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It started months ago," she began, her voice low and fragile. "Your uncle has been acting differently. He leaves home early, comes back late, and whenever I ask where he's been, he says it's work." I nodded slowly. That didn't sound unusual for busy men, but the pain in her voice told me this was bigger than long work hours. "He hides his phone," she whispered. "He takes calls outside. And last week, I found a message." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand against her forehead as if trying to push back the memory. Before I could ask, Aunt Elena took over, her tone trembling but steady enough to carry years of guilt. And that's when she called me. I turned to look at her. "You?" She nodded painfully. "I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to reopen old wounds." Aunt Maria closed her eyes for a moment. "But I had to ask," she whispered. "I had to know if he had contacted you." Aunt Elena inhaled deeply, her fingers trembling. And I told her the truth. He did. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Aunt Elena continued, her eyes filled with remorse. "He reached out a few weeks ago. Out of nowhere. He said he wanted to talk. Said he had unresolved feelings. I was shocked. I told him he shouldn't be contacting me, but he insisted it was important." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I didn't tell your Aunt Maria because I didn't want to break her heart. And I didn't tell him to stop because I didn't know what he really wanted." Aunt Maria looked hurt, but also relieved to finally hear the truth. "All this time, I thought I was losing my mind. I felt something was wrong, but I didn't know what." They sat quietly for a moment, two sisters who had been divided for a decade, now brought together by the same pain. "We came to you," Aunt Maria whispered, "because you're the only one he listens to. We need the truth. Not rumors, not assumptions. Just clarity." Their eyes pleaded with me. For the first time in years, they weren't enemies. They were two broken women holding on to the same fear. And I realized I was now the bridge between them and the truth they had been avoiding for far too long. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the expressions on my aunts' faces, the fear in Aunt Maria's trembling voice and the guilt in Aunt Elena's eyes. By morning, I knew I had to confront the only person who could give us real answers, my uncle. I found him in the backyard, sipping tea and reading the newspaper as if nothing in the world was wrong. He looked up, surprised to see me so early. "Good morning," he said casually. But I didn't return the greeting. "We need to talk," I said firmly. He raised an eyebrow but nodded, folding the newspaper neatly. "What's going on?" I sat across from him, feeling my heart pounding. Aunt Maria and Aunt Elena came to see me yesterday. For the first time, a flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "Oh," he said, trying to sound indifferent. "They told me everything," I continued. "About the late nights, the phone calls, and contacting Elena." The color drained from his face. He looked down at his teacup as if searching for answers in the swirling liquid. After a long silence, he spoke. "I didn't expect them to involve you." "That doesn't matter," I said. "I want the truth. Are you cheating on Aunt Maria?" He exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. "I'm not having an affair," he said softly. "But I was confused." "Confused about what?" I pressed. He leaned back. His eyes filled with a complicated mixture of regret and vulnerability. "When Elena and I drifted apart years ago, it wasn't because we stopped caring. Circumstances pushed us away. When she married my brother, I tried to move on. But when I saw her at your cousin's birthday last month, it brought everything back." My stomach tightened. "So you contacted her because you still have feelings?" He nodded weakly. "I just wanted closure," he whispered. "I wanted to understand why things ended the way they did. But I swear, I never touched her, never met her alone. I only talked to her once or twice. And Aunt Maria doesn't know this because—" He closed his eyes. "Because I didn't want to hurt her. I thought if I got answers, if I could silence old memories, I could focus on my marriage. But instead, it made things worse." He paused, visibly shaken. "I love Maria. I don't want to lose her. But I also needed to face the past that never really ended." His honesty left me stunned. There was no betrayal of the body, but the betrayal of the heart was undeniable. And now it was up to me to decide whether to expose the truth or help heal a family that was quietly falling apart. After hearing my uncle's confession, I walked back into the house feeling heavier than I ever had in my life. Every word he said echoed in my mind: his confusion, his guilt, his love for Aunt Maria, and his unresolved past with Aunt Elena. I knew one thing for sure. Whatever I decided next would change the entire family forever. I found both of my aunts sitting tensely in the living room. They stood up at once when I entered. "What did he say?" Aunt Maria asked, her voice cracking. Aunt Elena looked equally terrified. I took a deep breath. "He wasn't having an affair," I said. "But he wasn't innocent either." They exchanged confused glances. I continued, choosing my words carefully. "He reached out to Elena because he still had unresolved feelings from the past. He didn't cheat physically, but emotionally, he crossed a line." At that moment, Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I told him not to contact me again," she whispered. "I don't want to ruin Maria's life." "I never did." Aunt Maria stood still as if frozen. "So he still loves her?" she asked in a shaky voice. "No," I said gently. "He loves you." He was searching for closure, not a relationship. He was stuck between the past he never understood and the present he didn't want to lose. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Aunt Maria covered her face with her hands and cried, deep, heartbreaking sobs that shook her entire body. I rushed to her side, holding her tightly. When she finally calmed down, she whispered, "Should I forgive him?" The question hit me hard. I wasn't a marriage counselor. I wasn't a judge. I was just someone who got pulled into a storm I never asked for. But I knew the truth. "Forgiving him doesn't mean forgetting," I said softly. "But if you still love him, then talk to him. Let him explain everything to you directly. Only then can you decide." She nodded slowly. A few minutes later, she stood up with a strength I hadn't seen in her before. "I will talk to him," she said firmly. "But whatever happens next, it will be my decision." She walked toward the backyard where my uncle was waiting, guilt written all over his face. Aunt Elena turned to me. "Thank you for being brave enough to hear us all," she said. As I watched my aunt step outside to confront her husband, I realized something profound. Families don't break because of mistakes. They break when no one is willing to face the truth. And today our family finally did.